Hello, welcome to Steven Shinder Reviews in video form. It is November 1st. I finished Chucktober, but this is kind of a Chucktober epilogue, I guess you could say, because today saw the release of Doc of Chucky, a documentary about the Chucky films that came out on Shudder today. So, having talked about each installment of the Chucky franchise across 31 days, I figured, it seems natural to segue into talking about this documentary. This documentary was directed by Tommy Hudson. Um, and was even a co-writer along with Mark Allen Miller. So Tommy Hudson has been involved in some other horror things. Um, let's see. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong tab. Okay. So it was a is it writer or producer? Okay, it was a producer on His Name Was Jason, 30 Years of Friday the 13th. Never Sleep Again, the Elm Street Legacy. So those were '09, '10 in conjunction with the remakes. Scream: The Inside Story, 2011. So around the time of Scream 4. More Brains: A Return to the Living Dead, around the same time. Um, Love Beyond the Grave, a look at Return of the Living Dead 3. They Won't Stay Dead, a look at Return of the Living Dead. Which one is this? Um, Part two. Okay, so did they do those out of order? Like, what happened there? Or maybe they're listed out of order. And Crystal Lake Memories: The Complete History of Friday the 13th. That came out 2013. I'm pretty sure I've watched that one. Um, it was on Netflix years and years ago, and I do remember watching that one. And yeah, it's got some other credits since then. Um, Also has a writer credit on His Name Was Jason and Never Sleep Again, and a couple of these other things. But yeah, it has some other things listed, and Doc of Chucky is the latest thing on here. Now, Mark Allen Miller, what's Mark done? Um, okay, so writer of two episodes of Stan Lee's Lucky Man, The Bracelet Chronicles, uh, Virus of the Dead, 2018. Um, so a video game called Return 2 Runaway. I've never heard of that. I was a producer of the director's cut of Nightbreed. That came out in 1990. Let's see. Nightmare, Books of Blood. Okay. So, yeah, I do like when there are documentaries made on some of these horror properties, and evidently there may be more that I need to check out. Now, it's an almost 5 hour documentary, 4 hours, 55 minutes. So I'm not going to give a recap. I don't even know if you would call these spoilers, but I don't want to ruin the experience of some of the things you may learn from the documentary. Some things I'd already known from reading trivia or maybe from listening to the original Child's Play, the commentaries on that. But there were some things that I definitely learned for the first time. Now, you'll notice I say it's a documentary about the Chucky films. And yeah, there's not really coverage of the TV shows. There was a moment where I thought I heard Jennifer Tilly say our show. I may have misheard, but yeah, there's like no coverage of the TV show, which makes this really odd. It came out today, and yet it feels like a documentary that would have come out in maybe 2018, celebrating 30 years of Chucky, because that would have been after Cult of Chucky and before the TV show. So, yeah, it feels like something that if you watched it without having the context, you might think that it came out in like 2018, which is odd because there was also a documentary about 2 years ago, I think it was, called Living with Chucky, which was a different documentary, and it touched briefly upon the TV show because I think they'd finished making that documentary as the TV show was starting, or maybe airing its first season, and then it would have been after the first season when it came out. So yeah, a bit odd that, and this feels different enough from Living with Chucky, though. I, I'm just gonna say it right now. I'm gonna talk about Living with Chucky tomorrow, so we're not quite done yet. But that one does get a bit into the fandom of things. It's not a super exploration of like interviewing a lot of fans or whatever. Like, don't get me wrong on that. From what I remember, they did interview maybe a people here and there involved in the franchise. Maybe there's some overlap of people who were interviewed in this one, Doc of Chucky. I watched Living with Chucky 3 months ago, so I'll have to watch it tomorrow and get myself refreshed on it. But yeah, that one's an hour and 45 minutes, so it'll be a nice cool down, I think. But yeah, this 5 hour documentary, Doc of Chucky, it was worth the watch. It doesn't feel to me like it drags on. It does have talking head interviews, and I guess with some people are not really into the talking head style, but it does also include photos of certain things. Like for the first film, you get photos of earlier iterations of the Child's Play script, and even a couple photos of the original opening, which would have had detective, it would have had Mike in drag trying to lure Chucky right before chasing him, and they cut that out. But yeah, I do wonder if that footage exists. And like, it would have been interesting if they could have included that here, but no, it's just a couple photos of the scene. Um, and the first film does get the most coverage in this documentary, about 1 hour 29 minutes, so basically an hour and a half, and the sequels each average around half an hour or so. I actually have the run times written down on my phone. So, but all that being said, I did not feel like there was a lack of coverage for each of the sequels. That was kind of my fear as I was watching the Child's Play 1 portion of it, and thinking, oh man, is it gonna feel like the sequels are lacking in their coverage? But I ended up not feeling that way. So, coverage of Child's Play 1 is about 89 minutes. Child's Play 2 and Child's Play 3 each get about 33 minutes. Bride of Chucky gets 36 minutes, which is understandable because it revitalized the franchise. Seed of Chucky gets 31 minutes, which was a little bit surprising to me because I would have thought maybe because it was um, the most negatively received one, maybe they wouldn't have covered it as much. But yeah, I think they did a decent amount of coverage for that. Curse of Chucky got 33 minutes, and Cult of Chucky, I guess 40. Well, I'll say 35 because I feel like the final 5 minutes of this documentary are really trying to encapsulate the franchise as a whole. And yeah, there's no mention of the Child's Play remake in this thing. I love how committed they are to just brushing that under the rug, you know? I mean, at one point, someone even says Brad Dourif is the only person who can voice Chucky, and just not even mentioning Mark Hamill voicing. Well, I guess in that remake, the doll's name was Buddy or something, right? So it wasn't technically Chucky. But he did voice Chucky in an episode of Robot Chicken, weirdly enough. But yeah, so yeah, this is about the canonical franchise films. So yeah, there were some interesting tidbits in the coverage of each of these films. You even get bits of footage of the filming, like a little bit here and there, but not quite as much as archive footage from the films themselves and the talking head stuff. Like those get more screen time, but you do get bits of, behind the scenes here and there type footage. For Child's Play 1, I was a bit surprised that some of the things that we associate so much with Chucky didn't come from Don Mancini. Like, and there were things that he was kind of resistant about at first. I think in this documentary they say that Tom Holland, the director, was the one who suggested that Chucky originally be a serial killer and becomes a doll. Whereas Dawn, I think what Dawn said was that originally the idea was that the doll would be a manifestation of Andy's anger and that type of thing, and that would have been pretty different. I kind of wonder, like, would it have been as successful? Um, and Dawn was also not so sure about the voodoo aspect that they ended up going with, but now it's such a staple of the franchise and they still run with it. So it's interesting how, it's very much a team effort, the creation of Chucky, but then Chucky becomes seen more as Don Mancini's baby, and people involved even say that further into the documentary. So the fans even see Chucky as Don Mancini's baby, but there are definitely some collaborations in that first film that made Chucky what he is. And so I thought that was really fascinating. But I think Dawn getting more creative control as time went on, it doesn't betray what made Chucky great originally. And so, yeah, there's a lot that's covered in, they even got Catherine Hicks and Chris Sarandon to be interviewed about the first movie. And I thought it was funny when Catherine said that she really didn't like how Child's Play 2 just threw her character into the mental institution off screen. And she said that she likes the character of Mike and she hopes that Mike and Karen get married. And then when it gets to the coverage of Curse of Chucky, they mentioned that line about how Mike is still around. And yeah, it seems like, I guess Karen and Mike are married is a heavy implication of Curse of Chucky, that little line that's at the end. And supposedly Tommy, the doll in Child's Play 2, um, may have been named after Tom Holland. Like they talk about like an axe to grind, and it kind of sounded like they were joking, but like I don't know. I guess that's for you to decide when you watch these bits of the documentary. But yeah, Child's Play 2, they talk about the switch to Universal and how there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on, development of the second movie going on without Dawn knowing initially, and then having to switch from the company that did the first one because they want to pivot to kids movies or something, and then you get these other potential companies that could take the franchise, and when it gets to Universal, it's like Chucky has become a universal monster, so in a way it's an honor. And Christina Leese, who played Kyle, even mentions it's an honor to have the Universal logo. And Alex Vincent also talks a bit about his audition and the line that he thinks got him the role. And there's also a bit that he ad libbed in Child's Play 2, apparently, like the uh, want me to say your name backwards line. And later on in the later movies, Brad Dourif and Jennifer Tilly, I almost said Tiffany, uh, like ad lib some stuff that just get kept in. And John Waters mentions he's not an ad lib guy. He respects the writers. So it's funny how these different people involved have these different ideas or accidental things that happen that no matter what just end up becoming part of the franchise. They also occasionally mention that there are a couple things in the writing that you kind of have to just ignore. Like, the whole thing about Child's Play 2, like, is there really a reason for Chucky to bring Andy to the toy factory? And they show a little bit of footage of the alternate extended ending where Chucky would have been rebuilt. For Child's Play 3, even though Child's Play three's coverage was the exact runtime as the Child's Play 2 coverage, it kind of felt shorter somehow. I don't know why. But they do get into some of the casting and how, yeah, like as I suspected, Justin Whalen was picked because he looks like Alex Vincent. And the actor who plays Ellis was originally going to be Shelton, but they still liked the actor so much that they wanted to, write him as that character. And apparently, there was a bit of the queering of the franchise, definitely starting, I guess, in Child's Play 3, like for sure being on screen with like the lipstick and whatnot. But yeah, after that, the franchise is dormant. I kind of wish that they'd gone into whether there were any other ideas of how to bring back the franchise before settling on the Bride of Chucky idea. But apparently, it did take a bit of convincing, this Bride of Chucky idea. So they go a bit into that. And then Jennifer Tilly, it was kind of surprising how at first she did not like the idea of doing a Chucky movie. But now she's such a staple of the franchise. She's been in the franchise longer than she hasn't, which is strange to think about because we think of Chucky being the main character, but there are only three films where Tiffany's not in them. Uh, and the injection of some more humor and the talk of like puppeteering during the love scene, and Ronnie Yu, the director, talks about like, oh, it'd be so ridiculous to actually show. So I say we do it with shadows, and he had some neat things to say, and talking about bringing in people like Alexis Arquette, and they do touch upon the thing that I really dislike about the film, which is David's death. And Don does get asked. He says that people ask him if he regrets killing off David, but he mentions that basically if straight people can be killed off in horror movies, why can't gay people get killed off? So, yeah, I do see his reasoning, but it still upsets me because David is such a nice guy. He did not deserve to get hit by a truck, in the ridiculous fashion that he did. And then Seed of Chucky, it seemed like that film was originally going to be fast tracked because of how successful Bride of Chucky was. Maybe not as fast tracked as Child's Play 3 was because, they learned their mistake there. Let me just. I'll do that later. Um, so it seemed like maybe Seed of Chucky was originally gonna come out a few years sooner than it did, but they submitted the script and there were those studio notes of this is too gay and there's too much Jennifer Tilly, which I remember reading that quote somewhere within the past year. Um, yeah, and it's just so bizarre to think about how different the times were back then. But eventually, Focus Features, Seed of Chucky became part of that smaller division of Universal, I guess, and there's someone there who helped them out. And, it's a bit more of a complex story, I guess, than I'm making it out to be. Like, they explain it better. But yeah, during the coverage of Seed of Chucky, this is when Don gets to be the director for the first time, so he has full control. And there was negative reception for the film, but you can see how proud Don is of that film and how people have sort of come around to it years later. The Glenn Glenda thing and uh, talking about presenting Glenda as a transgender character. And, so I guess back then, um, that's how the character was viewed. But now for the TV show, uh, Gigi is non-binary. So it's interesting, the evolution of all of that. Um, and if they talk about how super meta the film gets and how fun it was playing fictional versions of themselves, like Jennifer Tilly, um, basically okayed like the exaggerations that make this fictional version of herself a worse person ever. So you do get the sense that people really had fun making this film, um, despite the negative reception. And then you get to Curse of Chucky, and Don does mention there was brief talk of doing a remake, and I kind of wish that he'd gone deeper into what that remake would have been like. I kind of wonder if maybe elements of what ended up in Curse of Chucky, maybe the backstory with Chucky stalking Sarah, maybe that would have been new backstory for the remake. But yeah, they mention the um, the things that had been happening in horror, remakes of all these other slasher films. But Curse of Chucky ended up continuing the franchise, and it did it in such a strong way. A surprising thing was Christina Leese was originally going to play Nico's mom, but they had to hire a Canadian actress. Like the way she says it, I get the sense that maybe there was like some rule or something. Um, but then again, maybe it was just that they ended up deciding on a Canadian actress. So yeah, that would have been kind of strange. I mean, the franchise has gotten in the habit of having iconic, like previously used actors, I should say, in the franchise play new characters. But I think at the time, maybe it would have rubbed fans the wrong way seeing Christina Leese back as a different character and she gets killed off. And you might have had fans be like, well, if she was on set, why didn't you do a Kyle cameo? Like, what the heck? So I do think it was a good thing that they did not have her play Nika's mom. But in Cult of Chucky, they do get her, and there it almost didn't happen. But Dawn was very, um, you know, set on, they have to do the Kyle cameo, and they end up doing it, and uh, they talk about her return and as well as Andy's return at the end of Curse. The girl who played Alice, apparently she was originally supposed to die in the middle of Curse, and they talk about how that death was originally gonna play out, but then there were some real life events, and they decided Universal decided it would be too dark, so they ended up with the ending they went with, which would have been, which is Chucky uh, possessing her, like replacing her soul. And something that I already knew was I read somewhere, I think, was that she was so afraid of the Chucky doll, but I did not know that they put like a bag over his head. And yeah, they talk about how Curse of Chucky is such a visually beautiful film, and there were some things that were discarded, that were used earlier in the franchise, so they kind of had to work with what they had. And yeah, the Curse of Chucky was definitely a triumph and a critical darling. Uh, and then we get to Cult of Chucky, and that they make this comparison of how it was cold there, like filming in Winnipeg, just like how it was cold filming the original first film, and giving more screen time to the legacy characters. And in these pair of films, we hear about Fiona Dourif and her trying to tap into, she was going to play Barb, but then they wanted her to play Nika. And I thought it was funny how the they touch on the criticism of, like, there's this celebrity who said something like, "Oh, the Chucky movies are stupid because you could just kick him," and basically that's where they came up with the idea for Nika. Like, what if she was a character who couldn't kick him? And it's really wild how choices like that can come from little criticisms like that. And they talk about uh, how she talks about how she called her dad, Brad, and asked, what's the secret to Chucky? And basically Chucky loves his job and is afraid of oblivion. And there's some nice interviews with Brad Dourif throughout the, talking about Chucky and all that. But yeah, and how what was like voicing the multiple Chuckies. And I think it took me watching this documentary to realize the parallel of multiple Malcolm. You know, Malcolm thinks he's different people throughout the film, and that's kind of like Chucky having multiple selves and possessing multiple people. But yeah, Cult of Chucky definitely a triumph, a favorite, even among at least a couple involved from what I remember. So yeah, it's really weird talking about this documentary because I'm talking about these tidbits that I found interesting, but I also don't want to like ruin the experience. So I kind of want to just leave it at that. You know, it was a great documentary. It covered the films, but again, I would have liked for coverage of the TV show. I think especially since it got canceled. So I guess there's part of me holding out hope that it would still get its time to shine months later after that season 3 finale. So I hope sometime in the future we get a documentary focused on the TV show. You know, interview the writers, talk about how they decide to make certain connections from the films, of where they got some ideas from, what were some things that almost happened, some things that were considered but ended up not happening. Interview the cast members. Um, like something like that would probably be a few years away at least, though, because at the moment we still don't know if the show is continuing in any form, and you know something like that would have to happen after they're sure that the show is done. But yeah, really hoping to hear more about the future of the franchise. But yeah, overall, I would rate this documentary a 9 out of 10. Like I said, it's a very comprehensive look at the Chucky films, but I do think it's really missing that TV show element. And even if this had come out in 2018, I think maybe I still would have given it a 9. Since there were little bits here and there where I wish they could have uh, thrown in some more obscure, unknown trivia, you know, things that even diehard fans wouldn't already know. But yeah, I think it does a real great job talking to the actors, the writers, directors involved, and it's very much worth the watch. Set aside 5 hours, or you could divide it into like I don't know, watch coverage of one film and then later on come back to coverage of another. You know, something like that. It's on Shudder, and yeah, it's really good. I definitely highly recommend it. So, like I said, I'll be back tomorrow to, I guess, finally finish this wrap up by talking about living with Chucky. And that might be shorter than this video that I'm doing now, but yeah, just wanted to tie a nice bow on the whole thing, revisit that again after having seen it a few months ago. So thanks for tuning in to Steven Shinder reviews in video form, and I'll see you all soon.